Coming up, a nonprofit in eastern Kentucky is changing up its work week.
Dedicated to eastern and southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 11.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. A nonprofit in eastern Kentucky is changing up how we view the modern work week. Appalachian in Letcher County is moving to 32-hour work weeks, and they are doing it without cutting pay. Jeremy Toms takes a closer look at the idea and their reasoning behind the decision.
Since 1940, when the Fair Labor Standards Act went into effect, 40-hour work weeks have been the standard for the American worker. But that norm is evolving.
For more than 50 years, we've been really exploring and trying to illustrate what's possible in Appalachia.
And Roger May says creating a new work week norm is just the latest iteration of Appalachion's mission.
It's just a really great way to encourage folks to strive for more of a work-life balance.
May says Appalachia has an employee rights committee that proposed the change, ultimately prompting a 6-month pilot program, which turned in very positive results.
63% of our staff saw an improvement in the quality of their work. 74% expressed a higher motivation, and 80% experienced a better work-life balance.
So now the store has formally adopted a 32-hour work week policy, with Fridays serving as a flex day.
You know, it really just depends on, what's going on at the shop during that work week.
May says some workers wondered if they could pull it off, and he needed time to adjust too.
Even though we did the pilot program for 6 months, it's taken a little bit to kind of shift into, the notion of being off on a Friday.
But he feels the flexibility will encourage creativity and show that they can shape the world they want to live in, even in the coal fields.
Increased productivity, higher motivation. You can't really put a dollar amount on that.
Jeremy Toms, WKYT.
May encourages other organizations to consider this approach with their employees. He hopes their success in reshaping the work week can be an example for those interested in giving it their own try.
Well, we are getting a break from the showers this evening, but we are watching out for some areas of dense fog across the mountains right now. Here's a live look from the WYMT studio. You can see some fog back in the distance and some low visibility for portions of the region right now, down to 0 miles in Jonesville, Virginia, down to 1 mile in Hazard, also Ashland, and 5 miles over in Harlan. So some areas of dense fog are possible as we go into tonight, but up on the radar, a small break from those showers from earlier today. But as we zoom out, we are tracking some new development over western Kentucky, also central Kentucky. Some more showers and maybe a few thunderstorms are possible as we go later on into tonight. Those temperatures at this hour are mild and muggy in the upper 50s and lower 60s, and when the temperature and the dew point are close together, that's when that fog can start to develop, and that's the reason that we're watching out for some dense fog as we go through tonight. 63 in Jackson, also Somerset, 61 for London, and 64 over in Pikeville. Lows tonight in the upper 50s and lower 60s. Again, watching out for a few showers and storms. More rain chances on Thursday, but some drier and warmer air on the way by the weekend, also next week. All those details coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
Cameron, thank you. A major break in the disappearance of a Kentucky woman today. More than 8 years after the Bardstown mother was last seen, Brooks Houck is charged with the murder of Crystal Rogers. Houck, Rogers' then boyfriend, has been the only publicly named suspect in the case. He was arrested this morning. Court documents show he's facing charges of murder and tampering with physical evidence. Rogers' body has never been found. For years, the unsolved case has gripped the community.
People in this community are, I don't know if they're smiling as much as this sigh of relief that there is an answer.
Houck is being held on a $10 million bond. He's scheduled to be arraigned next Thursday, October 5th, in Nelson County Circuit Court. Today's arrest comes more than 8 years after the investigation began. It all started on July 5th, 2015, the day Rogers was first reported missing by her mother, Sherry Ballard. By that point, she hadn't been seen or heard from for 2 days. More than a year into the investigation, more devastating news for Rogers' family. Her father Tommy Ballard was shot and killed on November 19, 2016. His murder still remains unsolved to this day. 5 years into the investigation, we saw new movement in the case in August of 2020. The FBI took over to lead the investigation. That led to a flurry of search warrants, but no arrests were made. Then in October of last year, the FBI conducted a new search, this time at a Nelson County farm owned by the family of Brooks Houck. After 5 days of searching, the FBI confirmed evidence collected at the farm had been sent for testing. And earlier this month, the first arrest is made in the Crystal Rogers case. Joseph Lawson is arrested in connection to the disappearance of Rogers. He is charged with criminal conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with evidence. And that brings us to today with the arrest of Brooks Houck. Supporters of a new Letcher County federal prison say it will benefit the community. The prison has been talked about for years by community leaders and lawmakers, but some groups are pushing back against the idea. More than 185 organizations recently sent a letter to Congress urging them to remove language that fast-tracks the construction. The prison will be located in the Roxana area of Letcher County. Pine Mountain Partnership Executive Director Jeffrey Justice says it could have a positive economic impact.
You have more people coming into town, spending money, getting gas, that kind of thing, buying lunch. But we also have to recognize that these employees are limited in their time off-site. So most of the economic benefit will be on their way to and from work.
Justice also says they are not totally banking on the prison being a huge economic boost. He says they have other projects in the works as well. Several Republican candidates met for their second presidential debate tonight. Former President Donald Trump's top rivals would like to stop his momentum before the Iowa caucuses formally kick off the presidential nomination process in less than 4 months. CBS's Danya Bacchus reports from Simi Valley, California.
7 Republican candidates trailing Donald Trump in the polls by a wide margin spent the night competing for their breakout moment.
Donald Trump hides behind the walls of his golf clubs and won't show up here to answer questions like all the rest of us are up here to answer.
Donald Trump is missing in action. He should be on this stage tonight. He owes it to you to defend his record where they added $7.8 trillion to the debt. That set the stage for the inflation that we have now.
After skipping the first GOP debate in August, the former president campaigned in Michigan Wednesday instead of joining his GOP rivals at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library. GOP candidates debated a range of national issues that at times unite and sometimes divide the party. GOP candidates went after President Biden on a range of national issues, including immigration, the environment, and the economy.
And Joe Biden's Green New Deal agenda is good for Beijing and bad for Detroit.
Unlock American energy. Drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear energy. Put people back to work by no longer paying them more money to stay at home.
Joe Biden should not be on the picket line. He should be on the southern border working to close our southern border because it is unsafe, wide open, and insecure.
Former Vice President Mike Pence, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley, and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy worked to set themselves apart from the crowd.
I favor ending birthright citizenship for the kids of illegal immigrants in this country.
Well, these law enforcement officers, they arrest these people and then they go and they're let out the very next day. So law enforcement feels like no one has their back. We have to start prosecuting according to the law.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie also shared the spotlight. Danya Bacchus, CBS News, Simi Valley, California.
Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson did not qualify for tonight's debate after making the first one. A U.S. district judge says she will not recuse herself from Donald Trump's 2020 election interference case in Washington. Judge Tanya Chutkan rejected his claims that her past comments raised doubts about whether she can be fair. She said she sees no reason to step aside in the case that is scheduled for trial in March that accuses Trump of scheming to overturn his election loss. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, is responding to comments posted online by Donald Trump. The former president suggested last Friday that the nation's highest-ranking military officer should be punished by death for communications the general had with China during the final months of the Trump administration. CBS Evening News anchor Nora O'Donnell asked him about this on 60 Minutes.
It almost seems odd to ask this question because the former commander-in-chief seems to be calling for your execution. Are you worried about your safety?
I've got adequate safety precautions. I wish those comments had not been made, but they were, and we'll take appropriate measures to ensure my safety and the safety of my family.
Milley says there was nothing inappropriate about the calls he made to China. The House impeachment inquiry into President Biden and corruption allegations gets underway tomorrow. The inquiry will investigate whether President Biden committed any financial wrongdoing associated with his son's business dealings. The White House has called the inquiry a political stunt. This is the third formal attempt by Congress to remove a president in the past 4 years. Hearings will still be allowed to take place even if there's a government shutdown. Well, lawmakers have just 3 days to avoid that shutdown. Senate leaders agreed to a short-term solution, a continuing resolution that would keep the government funded for 6 weeks, send $6 billion to Ukraine and $6 billion to disaster relief. But House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says he does not see support for that in the House, but the Senate is moving ahead anyway.
This shows we can work together, even with our differences, for the betterment of the country.
Government shutdowns are bad news.
If a deal is not reached, the short-term impact is no pay for federal workers until the shutdown ends. In the long term, an impact on nutrition assistance programs, park maintenance, air travel, and more are all possible. Coming up on Mountain News at 11, events are planned tomorrow to mark the beginning of online sports betting in Kentucky. And a cancer center expands at an Eastern Kentucky medical facility.
And we are tracking showers and storms in the short term, but warmer and drier air by the weekend, also into next week. All those details coming up after this break.